Good day. My name is Anna Frizzetto, and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Airswift. I figured before we get started, let me set the stage for our discussion. The energy sector is in the midst of a transformational shift with a perfect storm of surging prices, shortages, and the accelerating energy transition. Amidst this upheaval, workers are seeking more than just a paycheck, with a desire to make a meaningful impact on society, driving job satisfaction. While the workforce is more settled than ever before, the surge in supply chain costs and skill shortages poses a challenge for hiring managers. To capitalize on this moment of change, companies must embrace the fast-track career progression, innovation, and ESG, making it a key differentiator for their brand. In the 2023 GETI Report, we explore the industry landscape for oil and gas, nuclear, petrochemical, energy, and renewables, and provide insights on how to attract and retain top talent in this rapidly evolving sector. Now, some of you might say, what is the GETI Report? Well, the GETI Report, these insights can be used to be driving industry stakeholders to inform their decision-making processes and develop strategies to address current and future challenges. This report is compiled by Airswift annually. Now, the report highlights the importance of non-financial source of fulfillment and job satisfaction and the increasing desire among workers to contribute back to the community, back to the society. The report provides statistics and information on trends that hiring managers can use to inform their recruitment and talent development strategies. Now, the GETI Report, the Global Energy Talent Index Report, is an important resource for anyone working in or interested in the energy industry. So let's take a look at some of the findings from the report. I have to say I'm most excited to be joined by James Allen, Airswift's President of Europe, Middle East, Africa, and CIS. Welcome, James.
Morning, Anna. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So, James, why don't we just start at the very beginning here, the changing energy landscape. How have the recent global events and trends impacted the energy industry and job priorities?
Yeah, sure. So I think we have to go back even beyond 2022 and start looking back at kind of the end of COVID, and as the economies and markets and industries started getting back into growth mode post coming out of lockdown and the COVID period, we saw a kind of a huge bounce back across all the markets in the energy sector in terms of their hiring activity, project activity, capex expenditure. So the market was already rebounding from that, and then obviously the big item last year was the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and then that just threw everything else up into the air again. So we've seen a reshaping in many major markets in terms of how governments and countries are looking at their energy security and energy supply channels, and this has resulted in a resurgence in investment and growth in capex around the world, and we're seeing this everywhere really, to ensure that they can meet their future energy security needs. So at the same time, you layer in the fact that we've got the push towards renewables, but the world is still running on a lot of the traditional methods of energy supply. And as the world's trying to change and move away potentially from Russian supply, and new markets are entering the play, you've got all of these competing objectives and strategies, resulting in surging energy prices, and a growing focus on people. There's a lot to be done across all of these sectors and all these industries, and all of those initiatives require people. So it's having a huge impact, and we're in a very buoyant market, and those kind of global economic factors are having a direct, obviously, influence on what we're seeing in the energy industries and what companies are doing in terms of their hiring and who they need to deliver.
Right. So basically, James, what we're saying is that between COVID and the political climate, it has changed the energy landscape permanently, or at least until the next big change happens, which kind of leads to, factors contributing to changes. So what would you say are some of the key factors driving change in the energy industry?
Well, I think obviously I mentioned there, I think the energy security crisis that's born out of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. 45% of the EU's energy, 40% of the EU's energy was coming from Russia, so they're having to completely redesign their supply channels, and that means new sources of supply, which means new projects being invested into around the world. At the same time, though, you've got in the EU again, particularly seeking to move towards the alternative energy play, and 45% of the EU's energy wants to be coming from renewable sources by 2020, which I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're moving towards that. So again, these competing and factors are driving the change in the industry. We've got to keep the wheels moving with some of our traditional sources as we make that move towards alternative energy. But at the same time, with surging prices and oil prices are sustained high level, we're seeing that come through directly into the pay increases and the back pockets of the people working in these industries. I think in the GETI report this year, 44% of oil and gas respondents received a pay rise this year, and that was kind of 12-13% up on last year, and even before the pandemic. So we're seeing this surge of spend and project activity. That's a very good place to be if you're an oil and gas or an energy worker at the moment. This seems to be like you say, we're going to be in a sustained period of growth, investment, and lots of work around.
Right. So that kind of leads to looking at this transition going to clean energy. How is that shaping the industry overall and job preferences?
It's interesting because I think when you look through the GETI report, I think there's an overwhelming desire for whoever you are and whatever industry you come from or traditionally work in. There is a popularity and a desire for everyone. They want to play their part in the change from traditional sources to renewables. But at the same time, we're seeing this kind of balance of some of the existing work has to be done. So I think at the moment, while all markets are busy, and I think a lot of people have their best intentions at heart, but we're not necessarily seeing a huge exodus of people from traditional industries going into renewables. But I think the one thing that stands out for me throughout the GETI report is the fact that it is the most attractive place where engineers and technical staff want to go and work. That is the sector they'd like to move to. And we're seeing that again in the GETI report. I think 49% of oil and gas workers, that would be their preference if they were going to change sector. In power and nuclear, I think it's 54% and 31% respectively. So renewables consistently stands out as the desired place to be for any energy industry professional.
Well, what I love about this is that with the increase in clean energy and the high profits comment that you made in the previous question that we were talking about, we definitely see the job demands increasing, not just in energy specific, as you mentioned, but IT, AI, engineering fields. Now, I come from an IT background, so this is, warms me to no end to see the movement towards IT. But it makes sense, it fits, right? Because if you think about it, how you're going to create these new solutions, this new direction, it's going to require a technical component to drive those initiatives.
Oh, absolutely. And, we've been talking, I've been in the industry for 20 odd years. And, when I joined the industry as a 20 something, recruiter, we were talking about a skill shortage in the energy sectors then. We're still talking about it now. And that's, it's probably got more acute over the years. So, yeah, I mean, having to lean into IT, AI, and some of the kind of automation technologies out there is going to be critical to meet these, these strategic energy goals and these huge objectives governments and companies are setting for themselves. Whilst we're going to need people to do it, they're going to have to be supported by some of those kind of emerging and state-of-the-art technologies because so we are still short of people in these industries.
Excellent. So my next favorite topic is probably talking about ESG, right? The growing importance of ESG values. So how are ESG values affecting job selection and company policies in the energy sector?
Yeah, I think this last report and in the prior report, this is becoming an emerging trend that employees place a lot of emphasis and a lot of importance on what that employer, what that hirer is doing in terms of ESG across the board there. So I think there was a statistic we read somewhere that 80% of employees will consider the ESG factors when looking for a new job or looking to change jobs or looking at an employer that they're thinking about joining. So that's a huge percentage of in terms of criteria people look at. It's not just pay and benefits and the perks. It really shows that there's this changing dynamic again in terms of what's important to them, what they're doing, what's meaningful to them. And with all the big issues we've got in the world at the moment, environmentally, etc., it stands out that it's on everyone's mind. If 80% of job seekers place importance on that, it's something employers and companies have to really consider, wake up to, and ensure that they're meeting their own objectives and they're talking to those points, both to their employees and externally and publicly. But I think the other thing that came out, and what we're seeing is, respondents feel more comfortable than ever in expressing their views on in this area of ESG. And I think, the good companies out there are, involving their employees at all levels in their ESG initiatives, and they're taking their feedback and their, what they want to see happening in the business. They're really taking that seriously and building that into their ESG kind of strategy. So I think that's a really kind of a really nice direction the industries and companies are moving towards.
Right. So I think the pandemic really has taught us a few important things. I think individuals, employees are not only focused on work-life balance, but also focused on, giving back to society and focused on environmentals, which I think, that if you say like one good thing coming out of the pandemic is obviously this wake-up call in being able to fix our environment, most importantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So post-pandemic, attachment to home life. This is something that we've seen come out pretty strong in our GETI report. How has the pandemic influenced job relocation decisions for energy professionals?
Yeah, this is a really interesting part of the report. I spent a lot of time kind of trying to work out what it meant. I think the statistics that came out of the GETI report this year said that 80% of respondents said they would consider relocating for a job, which is still a very, these industries have traditionally always been very transient, and people have understood if you're going to, build a career in these industries, part of that will probably involve working in different places, moving to different countries, and spending some time, away from home for long periods of time. So, that's still a high. So I think job seekers and employees still understand that's probably a requirement of the job. So we've got 80% saying they would still consider relocating for a job. But at the same time, 41% of respondents identified proximity to family as a big barrier to relocating and moving. So I think my take on all of that is that, I think over the last few years, when some of the parts of the energy industry have been in a bit of a downturn, I think perhaps employers and companies have scale back what they offer to their employees in terms of movement and relocation. And obviously, post COVID, we know that a lot of things can now be done in a working from home, work-life balanced environment, and we don't necessarily have to be sending everybody around the world to relocate to get things done. But there are always going to be critical positions and critical jobs that have to be done in a certain place by certain people. So I think the takeaway from me is I think it's probably something employers and companies need to do is look at what they're offering at the moment, so there's a desire out there, but there's some kind of barrier. So maybe it's that, the offers of relocation don't meet that family dynamic. And maybe, I've seen it myself where, it's a single assignment kind of relocation. So maybe companies should be looking again at family relocation and supporting families moving to take new jobs, because it's certainly kind of, you've got two conflicting parts there that are difficult to unlock unless we can find a way to entice these people to move.
Yeah, I agree, James. I think the trend of going off on assignment for the next 18 months and I'll just come home to visit, 2, 3 times during that period are long gone. So we definitely need some creativity on the solution side of things. So now, how are recent trends and changes affecting the energy workers? What do you think has really impacted them?
Well, I think anyone who reads the report will see, it's very rosy reading at the moment, as we've discussed earlier on in this discussion here. It's a very buoyant market out there, and I think I hate to make predictions, but it feels like we're in a sustained period of growth across the energy sectors, just with the macroeconomic impacts we have got to deal with, and the way that the energy industry is going to have to reshape itself over the next few years. So I think we're in this sustained period of growth, investment, and work. So what does that mean for energy workers? I think they're going to have far more bargaining power. We are seeing wages go up. Both hiring managers and employees are equally buoyant about what's going to be happening with wages in the future. In terms of salary increases, I think it was 66%, and there wasn't much difference between the employees themselves and the hiring managers we surveyed. 66% of professionals expect salaries to rise this year, and we're seeing that in what Airswift, what we do, and we obviously monitor these kind of data points, and rates are going up. But I think as well, that generally it's a more grounded and satisfied workforce. There's lots of opportunity out there. There's lots of interesting work to do where you're at right now. There's lots of projects and developments happening in these big energy companies. So it's going to be harder to entice, people away. So again, this skill shortage isn't going away. This perennial problem of finding top talent is not going to go away, because at the moment we are in an employee-driven market. So employers and hirers really going to have to think creatively and aggressively in terms of how they entice people to come and work for them.
Right, and I think that probably leads to the discussion as to the role that ESG values have played into attracting employees. So how do you feel that energy workers influencing their employers and promoting ESG values in the workplace has actually created more of a retention?
Yeah, I think as we mentioned a few questions ago, I think employees certainly feel like they have a voice in this issue and this topic, and companies seem to be doing a fairly good job in involving their workers, and as we say, it's becoming more and more important in terms of a factor when choosing a new employer. So we know that, but I think one of the things that stood out in terms of this area was that only 11% of the workforce in our survey were composed of women, and only 36% of female respondents say that they will listen to and have an impact on company policy, which will probably include ESG initiatives. So I think this is again one of those kind of long-standing problems. Not enough women in the energy industry, but it feels to me like companies still aren't doing enough to tap into this huge workforce that whilst a smaller proportion of the overall is still a large number, and they still seem to be slightly over on the the peripheries of these conversations. So I think there's something to be unlocked there. I think we've seen some good movement in Europe, etc., with board composition and how companies are structuring their executive teams to make them more inclusive and balanced. But I think that's not quite filtering through yet to all levels of businesses. So I think there is an opportunity there, and obviously every company is going to have to look at their own makeup and the way they work to figure out the best way to unlock that. But I think there is a way to involve that kind of underrepresented portion of the workforce in a better way.
Right, and it's a similar problem in other industries also. It's kind of a challenge, but I do think that some of these items that we're talking about, the work-life balance, the ESG incorporation into the job offering, that those become like the creative ways that you can really attract a broader audience to the talent pool. Now, recently, I read that employees look for full packages other than title, pay, and medical benefits, which we've been talking about here. From your perspective, how significant of an impact has ESG been?
Yeah, I think the Getty report certainly speaks to that throughout. It's becoming, as I say, this is an issue that affects everybody globally, and it's being shouted through the report in terms of how much importance people are playing on this factor in terms of who they want to work for. They want to work for companies that are doing something about these big problems in the world. And whilst there will always be a good weighting towards compensation and benefits, I think people want they want meaningful work that they know is contributing to attacking and addressing some of these huge issues in society that we've got to deal with. So the more companies can make their position clear and make their voice heard in terms of what they're doing to benefit ESG in their communities and the industries that they work and the towns and cities and etc. that they're part of. This is becoming hugely important to people. Especially people with kids. Like myself, I'm thinking, what am I leaving to my kids? So it becomes a factor of all your everything you think about and decisions you make. That does have a slant now. It's really kind of worked its way into the psyche of the workforce. So again, doing a good job in this area and making your message clear and designing something that is exciting and people want to come and work with and get behind is a really good way of attracting talent and retaining talent, because it's not just about the pay packet. I was speaking to a graduate the other day, and he'd been offered a role at some company, really good money, blow your head off kind of money, but he was like, I just couldn't see where I was going with them. I didn't see what their objective was. I didn't know how they were changing the world. So he joined a much smaller company on less money because he felt he was aligned to what they were trying to achieve in dealing with some of these kind of big issues in the world. It's a very important part of how people make a decision now in terms of their next job or their move.
Right. And it's a little bit the pendulum swings, right? I mean, I remember a point in time where people definitely looked at the more impact that they're leaving a mark on the world was critical, to then everybody becoming very money conscientious and title conscientious, to now I think we're back to, we want to leave an impact on the world, and it might not necessarily be tied with a financial package.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, what's the next generation? What are we leaving for the next generation? We've got a responsibility to play our part, to bring them into to the next stage of that when we retire and we move on. So I think that is on everybody's minds, and I think just money and the cash culture, not as prevalent as it once was.
Right. Well, James, I think we could probably summarize our discussion that it's definitely an employee's market. The workers have more bargaining powers and options than ever before. There's definitely a growing focus on non-financial job fulfillment, which is fantastic to see. I do think that even though that we're more settled in the workforce, there is a reluctancy to move jobs. Right. So therefore, we need to get creative on how we make those packages worthwhile to move families, not just an individual. Supply chain costs are surging, exacerbating skill shortages, delays in filling vacancies. This is where I think we need to really see how we can get creative, because the competition is increasing for top talent in the energy industry. So the front runners in the future are going to be the ones that come up with packages that are more than just pay, promotion, and benefits. ESG, we've learned it's definitely going to be a brand differentiator and is going to be a key decision-making tool for us in the future. Well, with that said, this brings us to the end of today's webinar. We hope you found our discussion on key insights of this year's Getty Report both informative and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this webinar and would like to stay updated on more content like this, we kindly ask you to like and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll be the first to know when we release new webinars and podcasts that dive deeper into the energy sector. We are excited to announce our upcoming webinars, which will continue to explore critical topics within the energy industry. Our next webinar will focus on oil and gas and renewables. It's going to be offering valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities in these sectors as they continue to evolve. Following that, we'll host a webinar on petrochemicals, nuclear, and energy, providing a comprehensive overview of these crucial areas and their role in the global energy market. So don't miss these upcoming events, as they promise to deliver essential information and innovative perspectives on the future of energy. To participate, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to receive updates on our latest content. Thank you once again for joining us today. Thank you to James for being a source of wisdom today, and we look forward to having you with us in our future webinars as we continue to explore and navigate the dynamic world of energy. Until then.